Good afternoon, everyone. I'm back after a few weeks on break, and today we're going to discuss the standard potential of the new card Spirit Water Revival, because I think it's much more powerful than people realize. 100% of the comments, of the only comment on my last video preferred the unscripted format, so we're doing that again today until I hear otherwise. So let's get started with our discussion of the new card. Called Spirit Water Revival from the new set. So it's 3 mana. It exiles when it resolves, and it's a divination, which isn't very good, but there's more to it, you see. It has water bending for 6 kicker, so you can improvise or convoke to get your discount on the Kicker 6. And if you do that, it does a few things to keep in mind. It lets you draw 7 cards and shuffle your graveyard in, and then removes the hand size limit. Now, there are a few things to note about this card. One thing waterbending is, as I've said, both convoke and improvise, which means it's easier to use than either of those, which makes it very powerful. But we have not Time Twister. If you cast this, it's with the water bending. Obviously, it's harder to do than it is to cast Time Twister. So on the whole, this isn't as good of a card. But if you cast it, the effect is more powerful because A, you don't have to shuffle your own hand in. So if you have 2 cards, you go up to 9 cards and have no maximum hand size rather than resetting your hand. And B, you don't wheel for your opponent, so you don't risk giving them any extra material, which is one of the worst things you can do in Magic. Um, at this point, I want to bring up a conversation I had many years ago with my friend who taught me the game. It was right when the set Avacyn Restored came out, and we were arguing about whether Avacyn or Griselbrand was better. I was in favor of Griselbrand for the simple reason that black was my favorite color at the time. It wasn't very good at the game. And he was arguing for Avacyn, but eventually he came around for a much better reason than I did. And his argument for Griselbrand was that, and I quote, if you draw 7 cards with it, you will probably win the game. I also think that if you draw 7 cards with this, you will probably win the game, and that's why it has captured my interest. And I also think that the Waterbending 6 will be a lot easier to use than it looks. Where you should not play it is in a control deck, because they don't have enough permanents. Well, draw spells are good. It really isn't that impressive to cast this card for more than 4 mana, I'd say. It's a sorcery, so you don't want to spend 9 mana at sorcery speed in a control deck ever. And in standard, there are currently the cards Stock Up and Consult the Star Charts, which are much better options for a control deck. So don't play this card in a control deck because these 2 cards are both much better than it in that context. But where it is good is in a Convoke deck. So we still have Spyglass Siren and Novice Inspector in standard right now, and they both create 2 permanents for 1 mana that can be used for water bending. So you can really turbo this thing out, and they're both already pretty good cards. So these are more where I expect the kinds of cards to be that synergize well with Spirit Water Revival. So I'm going to go over a few of the different options in standard. I'm going to try to paint a realistic picture of the issues that this deck would face in standard, and maybe in a future video we'll talk about it in Pioneer as well, because I think it has potential there, seeing as we have Novice and Thraben Inspector and more. But without further ado, let's get started to the talk about Convoke decks, which are not really a thing in Standard anymore because of losing these cards. Voldaren Epicure, Gleeful Demolition, and Knight Errant of Eos just rotated recently, and they were crucial. So Voldaren Epicure is the same sort of deal as Thraben Inspector and Spyglass Siren, in that it makes a creature and an artifact for 1 mana. As far as I know, the Novice Inspector and the Spyglass Siren are the only remaining 1 mana ways to create 2 waterbending permanents in Standard at this time, but if I'm missing something, please let me know. Gleeful Demolition is just amazing with those kinds of cards we just discussed. The Knight Errant of Eos is a big payoff for flooding the board with creatures that lets you refill your hand. But now that we have Spirit Water Revival, I think that could replace Knight Errant of Eos as the card draw spell of choice in Convoke decks. So the question, though, is whether the deck should be blue-white or blue-red. Now, lately, before the rotation, most of the best Convoke decks were white-red, but that obviously isn't an option here since the card we're building around costs 2 blue mana. So it will be, could be all three, but I just think that having a double blue card may make it a bit too hard on the mana, and I think there is actually enough just to play one of white or red with your blue. So now we're going to get into the advantages and disadvantages of blue-red and white-red homes for this card. So we'll start with white. So here are some advantages of playing white. The aforementioned Novice Inspector is just really probably the best 1 mana creature that makes artifacts in Standard, because even if you don't convoke, you still get your card back when you sacrifice the clue. Warden of the Inner Sky is also in Standard. It's just if you're drawing a bunch of cards, you need to be able to win with them, and this lets you convert your on-board pieces of material into a powerful threat. And Cosmic Grand Zenith does a similar thing. It's both good at enabling Spirit Water Revival, and then it can make tokens to convoke it. But it's also good for as after the Spirit Water Revival, since you will definitely, for the foreseeable future after casting Spirit Water Revival, have 2 spells to play every turn. So they both fuel each other, which is nice. So I think Cosmic Grand Zenith is one of the big payoffs to a blue-white version of this deck. We also have these two creatures that do basically the same things. One's an ally, one isn't, but they are both token makers for 2 that make 2 pieces of material. Not as good as Spyglass Siren or Novice Inspector since they cost 2, but they have flash, which is nice. And these can also help convoke out the thing, and you really just want to play that as fast as possible. And when you make 2 bodies, of course, and you put counter, you can, benefit more from Cosmic Grand Zenith by going wide with creatures. Last thing here I want to talk about for white as a benefit is the card No More Lies. This is just a really good counterspell, and if you're playing 8 2-drops with flash, you will often find yourself with an opportunity to leave 2 mana up on your opponent's turn. If they play something you want to counter, you counter it. If they don't, you just flash in one of these guys, and I think that's really good. It's just one of the best counter spells in Standard right now, and I think having good interaction even in a proactive deck is nice. Then lastly we have Duskrose Reliquary, and it's a shame that you have to sacrifice a permanent, but this is a permanent, so it's neutral. It doesn't get you closer to the Spirit Water Revival, but it also doesn't get you further away. The main thing with the Duskrose Reliquary is it's just an extremely efficient removal spell in a deck that has enough tokens to facilitate it. And I think that's a nice thing about white. Then we have Flood Farm Verge. This is an advantage in so much as it isn't a tap land, but it really is more of a segue into the disadvantages. But this card's really good, and we are very glad to have Flood Farm Verge in Standard as an untapped blue-white land. Problems with blue and white are Starting Town, which is sometimes untapped, but not often. but not always, and it also hurts you. So we'd much prefer something like the cards you'll see in the next slide. But we will need more than 4 untapped duels, and since we only have the Verge, so we will need these. Then we have Meticulous Archive and Restless Anchorage. They're both like we'll probably have to play some number of these because we just need our mana to work, but this is a very fast deck and having tap lands is regrettable. So the main disadvantages of a white Spirit Water Revival deck are the tap lands. Then the cards that are missing are obviously the untapped lands. Hallowed Fountain, Seachrome Coast, and Arctic Wastes. Seachrome Coast and Arctic Waste both rotated recently, and then Hallowed Fountain is good. Um, Thankfully, it will be coming in January in the new Lorwyn set, which is great. But Azorius is one of the guilds that was missing a shock land in Edge of Eternities, and then of course the allied uh, fast lands also rotated, which is a shame as well. So the main disadvantages of Azorius are the lands. Let's talk about red. Now, red will be a lot more artifact based. But I worry that there's not enough support for it. So I will just stop you from wondering and say that I think that I expect at this time blue-white to be better. But I think there's a lot of potential for blue-red, and all of these cards will be legal all through 2026. So that's more than a year. And we should keep an eye out for anything new that might help with this blue-red artifact-based version. So the first card here is Pinnacle Emissary. This card is great at flooding the board with tokens if you have a lot of cheap artifact spells. Problem is that's what we're missing, but it has shown that in the right deck, in its modern use, that it's great in a deck like this. And I expect that if you can flood the board can get enough cheap artifacts to support this, the blue-red version will be better. Gleaming Geardrake is not amazingly exciting. It's just like a 2 mana flying Thraben Inspector, but unfortunately Voldaren Epicure rotated, so we're left with a 2 mana version. But I think it's still playable. Inspire Bluff Canal is what blue-white doesn't have, which is a fast land, so that is great to have that still in standard. That's the biggest advantage at this time of blue-red. Then we also have a few other cards. Weapons manufacturing is an advantage and a disadvantage. If you are playing a really intensive artifact deck, you can get a lot of artifacts in play with this. But it's an enchantment which can't be tapped. So we'll have to see if that works. This will require testing, but I think the first thing to do is, along with Legion Extruder and Torch the Tower, to try and just see how the card plays in like a standard version, the card being Spirit Water Revival in a standard version of weapons manufacturing decks. I think that it could be a supporting piece in that deck. Would be more the idea of these blue-red decks. But these cards are all very good. 2 great removal spells that work well in a artifact flooding plan, and weapons manufacturing also works with that kind of deck very well. And then we have Synthesizer Lab Chip. It's just a really efficient kind of threat that's a piece of material that can tap, and it just gets some early damage in, applies some pressure, and eventually can create to be a big threat itself. And Chainsaw is just a removal spell that leaves a permanent behind. You can equip it if you want to like a drone token, which is nice. Disadvantages are that a deck like this with Pinnacle Emissary really wants to have 0 mana artifacts to play, and here are the ones that there are in standard. Market Backwalker is something we won't ever play for 0 because we won't even be able to convoke with it since it'll die immediately if we play for 0. And Mox Jasper is just Darksteel Relic. So where we are lacking is in the zero mana artifacts department. Darksteel Relic's fine, but we can only use it for triggering the Pinnacle Emissary, or for just for convoking the Spirit Water Revival. And if you have a bunch of cards like this that don't do anything in your deck, it isn't as exciting to draw 7. So that's a problem. But I think you will probably still play like one of these if you wanted to build a blue-red version right now in Standard, which you shouldn't do. And the last card is Authora's Titanic God Core. This card just would be cool if you could crew it in this kind of artifact version, but you can't. So can't really play it because you can't. You're just not going to get enough power in play to crew it. Then there are a few cards that we're missing that we'd really like. Steam Vents, that's coming in Lorwyn, so that's nice. And the other things are not red cards, but they are artifacts that we would very much like someday to have in Standard. Springleaf Drum is, well, it isn't like a tempo positive way on the turn you're trying to convoke it. It does help you flood the board faster and dump your hand out, which means on future turns it'll be a lot easier to convoke Spirit Water Revival. Then we have Ornithopter, which is a card that should have been in Foundations but wasn't, which is just the sort of default zero mana artifact for these kinds of convoke decks. And we don't have it in Standard, even though it's been in so many other Standard formats. It isn't in this one. So thankfully, Springleaf Drum was originally printed in Lorwyn, so it's possible it could be reprinted in the new Lorwyn set. We'll have to see. But at this time, there just aren't enough zero mana, uh, enough cheap artifacts for the blue-red version. So I don't think either version is quite ready, but I'm just proposing some ideas for the new card, Spirit Water Revival, so that we can keep an eye out for any new cards that might be the missing pieces that either the blue-white or blue-red versions need. Pictured here is The Last Airbender. Thank you very much.